Good morning, everybody. Thank you for introducing me, and thanks for Madeline for that overview of the Newton Fund. So I'm Sian, I'm from DfID, and I'm a statistician, and you're probably wondering, why is a statistician up here talking to you about ODA, Official Development Assistance? Well, behind every good classification is a set of rules, and behind ODA is a set of rules that's 75 pages long. So I'm going to talk to you, I'll give you a bit of background around ODA and these set of rules, and then I'm going to go into a little bit more detail around how we decide in DfID if something is ODA, and how we support BIS and all the other UK government departments in understanding that classification. So my team in DfID of statisticians is the team that deals with reporting on ODA for the UK, and we also report those ODA figures to the OECD, who scrutinise our ODA return, and then they publish statistics for all OECD members on the global ODA spend. So the definition of ODA has been around a long time, longer than me even. It was agreed in 1969 by the OECD's DAC committee, which is their Development Assistance Committee. Now, ODA is a key measure and it's used in lots of aid targets and assessments of aid performance. It really is a kind of internationally agreed definition of aid. Now, DAC members agree this definition through a group called the Working Party of Statistics, which feeds into all the other committees at the OECD. And the UK can influence this big book of rules, but we can't set them or change the definition. So we're stuck with these rules to a certain extent. And in 1970, most of the DAC members, but not all of them, agreed to this long-term objective of spending 0.7% of GNI on official development assistance. So that's that 0.7 target that you'll hear in the public domain, something that the UK government has pledged to commit to. Now, in 2004 spending review, the UK government set this target to achieve that 0.7 target by 2013. Now, the provisional statistics for 2013 that my team have produced earlier in the year show that the UK spent 0.72% of its GNI in 2013 on official development assistance. A massive achievement. I don't have the numbers to hand, but I think it's 11.4 billion spend. And across all these DAC members, the global ODA for 2013, the provisional figure was $135 billion almost, and the UK amount of that in dollars was 17.9 billion. So you can see that the UK's contribution to this is enormous. And I think at this point it's also worth reflecting that the Newton Fund is a massive spend, but in terms of even the UK's ODA spend, it's a tiny little dot. Now, one of the key challenges of ODA is not to undervalue the Newton Fund at all, but one of the key challenges of ODA is that it's measured on a calendar year basis rather than a financial year basis. Now, this is a challenge for me and my team, and a challenge for Madeline, and a challenge for Treasury. And one of the other things that is really important to remember with all this, that my team, sitting up there in East Kilbride, just outside Glasgow, collecting data from across the UK government at a programme level. So it's really detailed information on how this official development assistance money is spent. We scrutinise that data, and we check through all the information and the descriptions. And then this data is then sent to the OECD, who then scrutinise it again. So, how do we decide if something is ODA or not? So there's a few different things that my team looks at, and these are really helpful for everyone to remember when they're thinking about what is ODA. So there's three kind of key components. Does it meet these rules? But these rules, even though they're really long, aren't exhaustive. They don't cover everything. There's lots of grey areas. And in some cases, they were written in the 1970s, some of these rules. So they're not so relevant to how the world works nowadays. We also look to see, is it consistent with international best practice? And we also look across the UK approaches. So it's things that other government departments will be doing or colleagues in DfID will be doing. So we tap into all those kind of colleagues and experts that we've got. There's also another thing we have to think about as well, and credibility. This is the UK government's aid budget. And we need to take into account, is this right for the UK to be spending money? This is a lot more subjective and generally not a decision for the statistics team. That's for others in DfID and in other government departments. But it's a really important part of the decision-making process. So when we're thinking about this rule book, there's a few really key concepts that is useful to take away. So the first one is it an official flow? Now, everything in the Newton Fund will be an official flow. It's quite clear what an official flow is. It's something going from the government to another organisation. Now, when does that official flow happen? This is something that we quite often get asked. Now, it's all about this point of disbursement. This is what the DAC rules refer to. And when the resources, i.e. the money, is placed at the disposal of the recipient country or the agency, that is the point at which you count the ODA. So it's not when the money's committed or promised. It's when the people who are going to spend that money have the money. Now, as Madeleine mentioned, there's also this list of ODA-eligible countries. And there's also a list of ODA-eligible institutions. These are published by the OECD. And the list of ODA countries is updated every 3 years. It's based on World Bank data on GNI per capita. And the list of countries are grouped into sort of low-income and upper medium-income countries. And it also includes all the least developed countries as well that are identified by the UN. Now, this list is being updated in 2014, so for the reporting for this year. And Anguilla and St Kitts and Nevis will be coming, well, we expect them to come off the list, that's to be confirmed. And in 2017, sort of early analysis that my team have done shows that we expect countries like Chile and Uruguay and the Cook Islands potentially to come off the list. It all depends on the income levels of those countries in previous years. Quite simply, if it's not on the list, it's not ODA-able. So it's a really important list for our work. As I mentioned, there's also this list for ODA-eligible institutions. Now, this sort of sets out multilateral organisations and big organisations, the coefficient. So if you're putting money into those organisations, all of it or a proportion of it will automatically count as ODA at the point that the money goes into that organisation. Now, quite a lot of the UK's aid budget is delivered that way through these large multilateral organisations. Now, another key component of the directives is this primary purpose test. So this is what Madeleine mentioned around that each transaction is administered with the promotion of the economic development and welfare of development countries as its main objectives. So very simply, that means that the primary purpose of that spend can't be benefiting the UK, and that's something that my team look at in a lot of detail. You know, we deal with a lot of proposals and provide advice to a lot of areas, and this can be quite subjective, and sometimes it's around the justification and the evidence that's provided to support that example and that area of spend. And also within this big rule book that we work with, there's some detailed advice. Not much, but a few little bits around research and scholarships and areas that are relevant to the Newton Fund. So the directives make very clear that research, whether being spent in the developing country or elsewhere, as long as it's into the problems of developing countries, then it's ODA, it's official development assistance. But we need to bear in mind that primary purpose test still, that it's all about the economic development and welfare of the developing countries. So it's all about, really, the way they've distilled it in the Newton Fund is quite right, focusing on poor people and poor areas and how it's supporting them. The directives also include references to in-donor. So by in-donor, we mean in the country that's spending the money. So in the UK, based scholarships and developing country-based scholarships. Training and research, including language training, collaborative research between donor and recipient universities and organisations, development-orientated social and cultural programmes, and ad hoc contributions as well, such as conferences, seminars, workshop, and work related to development awareness. Now, you'll recognise a lot of these because a lot of these components are covered by the Newton Fund. And there's been a lot of work to ensure that the Newton Fund is heavily aligned with these directives. But that's not to say that there won't be queries and questions as we go along this journey. And something that my team, working with Alicia and Madeleine and her team, will be to kind of build up a set of case studies and examples that we can use to help answer these questions. Maybe one day we'll have a great set of FAQs for everybody on this. So if we think back to this funnel, there was this, does it meet the DAC directives, which I've just covered. Now, there's also consistent with international best practice and consistent with the UK approach. Now, these are really important These rules don't cover everything. And a big job of my team is trying to find the evidence to support and justify what the UK is doing. So there's quite a few sources that we can look at. So in terms of international best practice, the OECD publishes a lot of information. We have good relations with the other members, and we'll quite often discuss ideas and pieces of work that we're doing with them and find out what they're doing in that area. Also, really helpfully, when we provide all that detailed data to the OECD, so do all the other donor members. And that detailed program-level spend data goes into the public domain. And that's available for everybody. It's available to everybody here on the OECD website. And that provides very high-level detail, but some information around what is going on in different developing countries and what different donors are doing in those recipient countries. So in a sense, it provides a database of practice and what's happening. There's also, so that's labelled the CRS data, that detailed data, but there's also IATI data in the public domain. Now that's a slightly different data source. That's kind of live aid spend data. It's not a detailed, but that's also available for people to interrogate and see what is happening in terms of aid spend across the world. The other kind of key area of evidence that my team build on is what is the UK doing? Is this proposal that we've got sitting here on our desk consistent with what DfID does in a research area, what BIS is doing already with the MRC, and also other programs that the UK is doing through other government departments? And then finally, if our evidence base isn't strong enough to support or justify or feel that we're comfortable with something being ODA, then we go and speak to the DAC. That's the Development Advisory Committee, Assistance Committee at the OECD. They have an ODA hotline, so to speak, and we ring them up and they're happy to answer queries. And again, we build up that case study and that evidence around what is ODA. I think a key point to make here is actually that the definition of ODA doesn't stand still. At the moment, there's the programme of ODA modernisation and a lot of debates happening at the OECD amongst its members around how the definition can change. None of these are touching at all into the area of research. They're mainly around how we report loans and other financial instruments as aid. But the definition can change, and that may mean that things around the Newton Fund may have to change. So where can you find out more? There's lots of information on the OECD website. There's a really good sort of two-sided fact sheet on is it ODA, which you may have already seen, but it's a really helpful starting point for whether getting some background on what is ODA and what isn't ODA. My team produce a lot of statistics, and within those statistics there's a lot of background information, a lot of definitions, and a lot of concepts in there. And just a quick plug, we've got our latest statistics for 2013 on official development assistance, and lots of other statistics about international development and the UK spend coming out next Thursday at 9:30. And yeah, it's really interesting, so take a look. So thank you everybody for listening.